The whole industry has certainly a great number of inefficiencies. Climate change is not solved. Man-made carbon emissions is not reversed. The world is more and more tuning in to the urgency of addressing the needs of the sustainability initiatives.
Asad is the CEO and founder of Verdana. So how can sustainability farmers and as well to agriculture, which is close to 2.6 billion people worldwide?
We become carbon asset managers, managing the entire end-to-end process of monetizing the carbon credits generated from their activity. Working with the World Bank, we co-created a scheme called the World Bank's Low Carbon City Project. In Indonesia, we have formed a formal joint venture with the largest farmer cooperative, INDUK, which has over 10 million farmer members, 50 million people. The type of technology progress that we've had, especially with AI and AI-related tools, accelerate the amount of touch points we can have with a large user base like this.
Hello, everyone. My team and I have been crafting content and stories that inform, inspire, empower, and bring real value to you. If you haven't already, please take a moment to check that you're subscribed. It's the easiest way to support our work and stay updated with every new release. Join us on this journey of learning and discovery. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for our latest drops.
Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda, the YouTube podcast show, once again powered with citiesabc.com, businessabc.net, and wisdomia.ai, and as well in association with intelligenthq.com. Once again, we continue profiling global leaders and personalities, and as well pushing forward the boundaries how we look at business, technology, sustainability, and especially how we create bridges between different countries, different visions of the world, and how we create innovation that can actually empower us to improve our world and our society. So today I have the honor to come back or bring again a special guest and personality that has been collaborating with me and our organizations for a long time, and someone that has actually been touching a lot of different areas like a magician. Asad is the CEO and founder of Verdana, a cutting-edge company that offers cloud-based software as a service platform for carbon management and trade in carbon, and providing secure and credible carbon footprint analytics. Verdana has launched multiple products. For some of them include the partnership with Verdana and the World Bank, Hong Kong carbon market development, the INDUK Verdana carbon joint venture with Indonesia Pharma Cooperative INDUK, the Zoetic, that is a clean energy technologies for power reduction, and VCT verified carbon tokens. Verdana has been creating a lot of new innovation around how we can actually leverage better sustainability and carbon efficiency and integrate nature-based solutions and carbon credits to support international development, and very focused as well in agriculture and cities. Azad as well has been working as the CEO of Eco Consortium, a pioneering joint venture between Verdana and Eco Registry. He has been serving as advisor to Zero13, a regulated digital exchange focused on carbon credits and ESG real-world assets. And his career began in 1990s at Citibank in New York as an equity research analyst. He later moved to Daiwa Bank in Hong Kong, followed by senior roles in multiple banks, and he actually was a former CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. He was as well the co-founder of Fractal, a company focusing on sustainable solutions, and mentor startups through accelerators such as Conception X and Startup Bootcamp IoT. And through his epoch and leadership, Asad has been earning recognition as a veteran in the business and financial and investment banking industry, with significant focus on sustainable finance and innovations around that. Asad, it's great to have you here again.
Yeah, good to be back. Hi, Dinis.
Before we move on to the next part of the interview, I'm happy to introduce you to a unique all-in-one AI design agent. Why does a simple idea for a presentation, research graphic, or LinkedIn visual still take hours to create, Lovart, an AI design agent that completes the whole creative workflow in one place. You can generate an image, edit it, fix text, export, and redesign all in one tool. Let's see what happens when I prompt Lovart to generate a series of AI future posters for my channel. In seconds, it creates multiple design variations using Nano Banana 2, a fast and cost-efficient model built on Gemini Flash architecture. I can then select the posters that best match my audience and refine them directly inside Lovart. Using Touch Edit, I can adjust visual elements in the image. With Text Edit, I can change the headline without breaking the original typography. And with Edit Elements, I can redesign objects or backgrounds. So instead of moving between tools, the whole process, generation, selection, and editing happens in one workflow. Try Lovart today. Meet Nano Banana 2, now live with a launch offer of up to 50% off.
Fantastic. So, Asad, since last time we spoke, there's a lot of things you've been mastering and you've been pushing forward. So let's start. I think for people listening to us, I think I made a reintroduction, but I would like to talk a bit because the last time that I brought you here, it was mostly you and a partner of yours. So let's start by you, a bit of your background for people that don't know so much about you, probably more the professional and the career, because you have a fantastic career. Dive in Verdana and your achievements.
I started my career as in the bank. I was at Citibank in New York and then multiple other places. Fortunately, I was sent overseas as quickly as they could send me. They sent me to and the UK and Hong Kong. So I had a chance to get exposed to a lot of different marketplaces, cultures, people, etc., which was always something that I've enjoyed all my life. I was born in India. I grew up in the Middle East. I moved to the US into education in the US, high school, undergrad, grad. So I continued that journey by traveling quite extensively as a banker, first with Citibank, then with other banks, as you said. And after finishing, almost a 20-year career in banking, mostly on the, trading and research side, as you mentioned, for equities. After that, I naturally moved more from investing other people's money to investing my own money, and started venture investing and investing in earlier stage companies like startups, and have created startup venture platforms, invested into companies, have mentored companies, as you mentioned in my bio as well. That graduated over time or evolved over time in setting up my own startup, which is Verdana. And Verdana is the project that I've been leading for the last 4 years now, almost coming up to four complete years in Verdana. And we've gone through the stages of development in that project, in that venture, and also during this time have participated, in the fast evolving carbon marketplace, which is a very exciting marketplace to be part of, because that marketplace still is quite early stage and requires a lot of additional improvement and innovations in it. And so we're happy to be contributing to that process. It took me like a year to really understand what the carbon marketplace was really about and what the different, elements of it involved, what kind of expertise was involved in the different elements. So, the upstream part of the carbon marketplace is very much around science and methodologies and, and bringing the right type of implementations to the marketplace. The midstream part of it is the processing of that, end-to-end chain, from reporting data to, converting that data into compliant reporting, and to having it audited and verified, having it submitted into registries, and converted into approved carbon credits, and then taking that and delivering that through various distribution channels, ultimately into the customer. Right. That was the Eco Consortium project, which is now a division of Verdana, in which we system integrated all those service providers into one digital rail so that we could streamline that very arduous and analog process and make it more efficient. And then the downstream side is really the end goal of where we were going with this venture, which is becoming a marketplace or providing marketplace services around carbon credits. That includes, market making them, productizing them, distributing them. And so we have, after coming up with this roadmap, we have successfully over the last, 2-3 years, built the toolkit around it so that it functions in the way that, allows us to accomplish this. And we've also onboarded customers that allow us to bring this to market. So having completed that, we're at an exciting stage of our life cycle of this business where we now can, enter the market. We're in the go-to-market phase, and we can scale this business up. And I think it really synchronizes very well with the overall development of the carbon marketplace, which is also at a stage, especially the voluntary carbon markets, where a significant growth is occurring in that marketplace as new demand groups enter into the marketplace. There's a joke in the carbon marketplace that you can fit all the buyers of voluntary carbon credits into one restaurant for one lunch. And that's because, it was primarily a very small number of, buyers. It was the big oil and gas companies, mining companies, the tech giants, and the list really started petering off very quickly after that. So it was kind of a bespoke marketplace where, large projects would handshake with these big buyers. And now that marketplace is disintermediating into, a much more fractionalized marketplace where different demand groups are entering into the carbon marketplace, and we're able to productize and offer different products for them to consume. And it goes all the way down to other, business enterprises, to SMEs, to consumers even. And it also goes up into funds, financial institutions, banks, and ultimately sovereigns. And the development of the carbon market has also enabled, I think, this scalable activity in the carbon marketplace. As year after year, we keep introducing ways to make this product more credible, to make it more investable, to make it more transparent. And the digital platform that we have speaks exactly to that. It enables transparency, it enables scalability, it enables auditability and integrity. And that's really the role that we have in the carbon marketplace.
So you mentioned a lot of things, and there's a lot of topics there. So let's go first of all about Verdana and why you create Verdana and what the problems it's solving, because it's quite an ambitious project. And of course, the sustainable industry right now is a bit upside down with all the geopoliticals. But of course, everyone, I would say, even with all the geopolitics, everyone knows the importance of sustainability. So a bit of context, and as well how you see these different things.
Well, Verdana has evolved into an ambitious project, but what we originally started was a startup that just tried to provide a digital toolkit for what was, or what continues to be, very analog and arduous processing of data into GHG compliant reporting. Just as simple as that. It's the measurement, reporting, and verification step of the carbon reporting process is kind of the entry point or the gateway into the carbon marketplace. And doing that in an analog fashion just seemed to be an extremely inefficient way to do it. Time consuming, expensive, requiring a lot of labor. And so by digitizing that, we added a new category to the MRV marketplace, which is the DMRV, the digital measurement, reporting, verification. And that was the goal. And as you said from your introduction, we launched as a software as a service platform to provide this DMRV for various specific applications, mainly around power-based emissions reporting. Why power-based emissions? Because it's much more digitizable. If you look at nature-based solutions, if you look at complex around blue carbon, which is like restoration of natural assets, or if you look at carbon sequestration, or carbon capture, they're complicated, right? That's why there's a lot of science involved in it, and therefore it's more difficult to digitize. But there's a huge product category which includes electric vehicles, includes solar and other renewable energy, includes building management and efficiency, includes data center power efficiencies, which is a huge category, in terms of power consumption, includes smart grids. This is a big category, right? Emissions coming from what we call commercial facilities, which includes all of these things in that definition, accounts for some 40% of all man-made emissions. So by targeting that, we thought we could, address a very large lane, which is largely empty, because most of the scientists in this business are focused on the more complicated problems, as they should be. So we took one of the less complicated, methodologies in the marketplace, and we digitized that, and have found significant success in doing so with no less than the World Bank. Working with the World Bank, we co-created a scheme called the World Bank's Low Carbon City Project or program, which, just like the name suggests, is a urban-wide initiative to reduce power consumption in commercial facilities and other building assets, so that the saving in power consumption result in a large pool of branded, cheap, plentiful, auditable, transparent carbon credits, which can be used by many different, because it's World Bank branded, they can potentially be used by many different large consumers like the airline industry or the hospitality industry, or anyone who wants, basically plentiful, plentiful but high integrity and branded carbon credits. So our first objective was successfully with the introduction of the World Bank LCCP, which is currently in its early rollout stage in Bangkok in Thailand, and over time will expand into other marketplaces as well. This was, in total, a 1.5 to 2 year project, to develop this reporting mechanism, to integrate it into the program, to onboard the assets and run it through this system that we built. And so, we feel that that's brought us a lot of credibility in the carbon marketplace, working with an institution like the World Bank. And it also allowed us to successfully test out this hypothesis that building a digital toolkit around the upstream part of the business, which is just reporting of data and converting that into, a more streamlined process for processing and issuing carbon credits. We successfully validated that hypothesis with this product. So that's the first part. Then we moved on to, okay, well, we've done that. Now, with each step, we've added more complexity, and we've worked downstream into, and we've also brought in, customers to help us bring those products to market. So the second step of it was that if we have this toolkit and it's working, what if we were to bring it within enterprise ecosystems, or within, let's say, company products, so that these new participants can come into the marketplace and issue carbon credits or generate carbon credits where they, hitherto had not been able to do so. And so the clean tech companies were a target for us. We successfully partnered with an American clean tech company that also is a shareholder in Verdana, and Verdana is also a shareholder in them. So we've developed a very close relationship with Zoetic, which is an American company that has a portfolio of clean technology solutions, including green refrigerants that go into data centers and building facilities and anywhere where refrigeration is used, and also for water remediation, for clean power generation technologies around that. Also, as they're now moving upstream into mining of rare earths and also into processing of rare earths material, all of these big box categories now a proprietary platform for reporting that data efficiently, collecting that data, converting it into compliant methodologies, and submitting So we become an asset manager for big companies like that in the end-to-end process of their carbon credit or their carbon asset management. Moving on from there, we then interconnected the different service providers within that processing, life cycle, from reporting of data to generating a methodology compliant report, like what we call a PDD, to submitting that into approved auditors, to delivering that into standard bodies for certification, for issuing those the credits onto registries, and then for delivering those issued credits into either marketplaces or into customers. That life cycle has a number of different independent service providers, all strung together, and we system integrated them into what we call Eco Consortium. Just like the name suggests, it's a consortium of different service providers that interconnect to make that entire process, which takes time, money, and a lot of processing, to bring all of that and streamline it so that we can save time, we can save money, and we can also allow for more people to use it. Because ultimately, the carbon marketplace developers want three things. They want the best price for the carbon credits they generate. They want the most carbon credits that they can generate from any intervention that they do, and they want it as quickly as possible. So it's de-risked. You have less risk when you can turn it around quickly. And this system integrated rail, as we call it, allows, again, for power-based emission customers to, and potentially for others as well, like nature-based and others, it allows them to utilize the system integrated digital rail to achieve those objectives of reducing their time, reducing their cost, and increasing the number of people using it. And we're doing that in Hong Kong, with some significant partners that are top-tier providers of standard body services and registry services in the marketplace, to develop Hong Kong as a carbon marketplace. Because the more efficient these processing capabilities are in a particular marketplace, the more developers will come use it, and the credits will then be introduced into those marketplaces. So more buyers and sellers. And Hong Kong is a financial marketplace, so it's completely logical that we would do it in that type of an environment. And that's an ambitious program. We're in the life cycle of bringing that to market, but we've made a huge amount of progress, especially this year, over 2025 in that, I'm proud to say. So that's now a fourth business division. So just to recap, we have the World Bank project, which is the first vertical, you can say, of Verdana, which is the SaaS platform that you mentioned, or the reporting tool, digitized. We then digitized reporting tool and brought it into proprietary ecosystems within enterprises, like what we have done with Zoetic, and we become carbon asset managers for those enterprises, managing the entire end-to-end process of monetizing the carbon credits generated from their activity. And then the third part is integrating that capability, or using all the different service providers that allow us to do the asset management onto one digital rail, and bringing it into a marketplace like Hong Kong, and potentially others as well. But we've got our hands full just doing that in Hong Kong to begin with. And Hong Kong is the gateway to, of course, Greater China, which is very, very significant marketplace for carbon credits, and for carbon related projects. And so that's a third area, that we've done this. And then a fourth, saying that, okay, if we have all these tools, how can we bring these tools into a large asset pool that is not yet being properly monetized? And that's what we're doing in Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have formed a formal joint venture with the largest farmer cooperative, INDUK or INDUK Kayude, in the country, which has over 10 million farmer members. And if you look at their family members, you're looking at 50 million people. That's a very significant, large addressable marketplace, and an asset pool corresponding to that. These are small holders, small farmer holders and fishermen, etc. But the aggregate asset pool that we're working with is in the tens of millions of hectares of all types of agricultural commodities, rice, especially paddy, but also oil palm and cassava and cash crops, sugar, and even live cattle, poultry, fisheries, and working with that, there's an open canvas for us to say, hey, with this toolkit that we've built, which ones of them can be brought in to such a large asset pool and help monetize, the sustainable activities that are being implemented across these assets to generate carbon credits and therefore generate an additional income, which is vital for these small farmer holders and small fishermen, which are at the bottom of the pyramid of society, right? So there is a strong political will to help empower these people and bring them products, services, bring them additional incomes, bring them introduce efficiencies into their activities so that they can be more productive. And we are part of that ecosystem with this joint venture that we've created in Indonesia. So we have an opportunity to now bring this toolkit into a large ecosystem and bring it to scale in a very important marketplace for this, Indonesia. And this would be a showcase that we can demonstrate around the world. As you know, we've invited Studium to work with us on this important project. And I'm sure the technology solutions that we can introduce with Studium's, with Studium's catalog of IP is going to be very effective for us to do that in Indonesia. So that's a fourth vertical. And now it starts getting, like you said, this is an ambitious project, right? We started off saying, hey, let's just put a SaaS product on the market and see who wants to buy it. And, step by step, we've now got ourselves deeper and deeper into the quicksand that is the carbon marketplace. And, and we're hopefully, so far we're keeping very much afloat, but we realize that it's a marketplace that does require a lot of solidification and a lot of foundational work, and we're happy to be part of that. So that is an introduction of what we have done at Verdana for the last 3-4 years now. It's been a step-by-step process. We've onboarded these significant customers to allow us to, to realize the vision that we had mapped out for each of these customers and ecosystems. And that takes us to the current moment in time. And looking forward, now suddenly I get to do in Verdana what actually I always wanted to do, which is use that 20-year experience that I had sitting on trading desks in the financial marketplace to bring those into the carbon marketplace and be a financial services provider in the carbon marketplace by productizing the carbon credits that we have already created through our process and with our customers, and by bringing innovative new carbon credit products to new customer groups, like, for example, tokenizing carbon credits, tokenizing verified, carbon credits, not just carbon projects that aren't mathematically precise. We can give you exactly, the audited, mathematically precise accounting for the carbon credits that we have tokenized, and then can issue into different B2B2C type channels. It can be delivered into enterprises. It can also be delivered into consumers via those enterprises. That takes us into an entirely new game. We've spent most of this year developing that product and bringing it to market. We actually announced it earlier this year in April at the possible conference or summit, which is basically the gathering of all chief marketing officers mainly in North America every year. We announced it in that location in Miami this year, so that it has the potential of being not just a localized product for a specific customer, but a generic standardized product that we can put on the shelf that any number of different applications can use it for. It can be used by the hospitality industry for carbon offsets of customers staying in hotel rooms. It can be used by the sports and entertainment industries for large venues like the World Cup is coming up in North America, or concerts where you've got 20,000 people in the stadium. The carbon emissions footprint of these activities is significant, and providing these carbon offset tokens that can be bundled with the user experience, with the ticketing prices, with the consumption activities in the in racing events, in football events, in theme parks, in cruises. There's so many different applications. Really, you have to start thinking along the lines that our emissions activity is a activity that needs to be accounted for, needs to be properly reported on. And if it's properly reported on, it can also be properly offset, right? And this includes consumer activity, it includes commercial activity, enterprise activity. Ultimately, there has to be a ledger in which we balance the amount of emissions we're making and the amount of emissions we're saving, and we try to equate it as much as possible so that, we're netting that out, right? That's the net zero objective. The Verdana carbon token, or the verified carbon token, product by Verdana, is directed towards many different new use cases to achieve that. And I think it's really probably our most exciting product that we have brought to market, and certainly the most ambitious one. And it also allows us to target all these exciting new customer groups that any one of them on its own would, result in a huge enterprise and a huge business. But, if you look at it in aggregate, this is an addressable marketplace in the trillions, So we're not the only ones doing it, obviously. Thank God there are other people also doing it. We don't want to be the only ones doing something, because that would mean maybe we're completely cuckoo about it. But if other people are doing it as well, that gives us a lot of confidence that, hey, we're all working collectively on a solution that in aggregate will transform the marketplace.
So there's a lot of stuff. So let me cut in small parts. So for people listening to us, so first of all, I would start with the first. How do you contextualize the present state international of the carbon industry and sustainability? Because at the moment, there's carbon footprint, there's concepts like sustainability 360 that companies have to follow. Then there's ESG, and there's a big confusion around this topic. And as well, of course, we have governments that don't take this serious, governments that take this serious. If you are in Europe, you have to be very serious about it. So if you could just give a bit of introduction, and then I want to go probably start with the World Bank case study. And then second, like you said, in the biggest project, that is the carbon.
That question has a lot of moving parts to it. So let me try and break it down and give you an answer that's useful, if not comprehensive. So the entire sustainability umbrella is a very big umbrella. It's a huge tent that involves a lot of different activities, ESG activities, sustainability programs. It involves, the carbon marketplace, the carbon credit marketplace, and so there are many, many different lanes in which you can travel and still be under that broad tent. When I talk about what we've been doing, our work has been specifically within the carbon marketplace lane, and that too working with verified carbon credits from the top tier standard bodies and registries. That's what we do, but that doesn't mean that that's the whole industry. The whole industry, by and large, is still evolving. It's a cottage industry. It's a work in progress. It has certainly a great number of inefficiencies. By the way, if it was working and it was completely efficient, then we wouldn't have a problem, right? Like climate change solved, man-made carbon emissions reversed. Well, that's clearly not where we are. We're a long way from that. Climate change is not solved. Man-made carbon emissions is not reversed, and therefore we are working towards all of these things, kind of being integrated into a solution that's pushing in the right direction. That's not how it is right now. Anyone who says they know the carbon marketplace doesn't know the carbon marketplace. Again, another kind of inside joke in the industry, because it's designed to be little pockets working kind of almost independently of each other. Everyone's building their own little mousetrap and coming up with their own localized solution. All of that is important. Nothing wrong with that. It just has to, in aggregate, in total, have to move the entire machine into the a common direction. So that's the state of the carbon marketplace. From an entrepreneur point of view, that's very exciting also, because when you have an inefficient, sort of cottage industry marketplace that is yet to consolidate, yet to have consistencies or kind of a ubiquitous kind of mechanism, then there's a lot of opportunity, right? There's a great deal of opportunity that we have to help, to help build solutions, help build innovations that address that. And we're just one part of that entire complex machinery. But that complex machinery as a whole, if you're talking about it, what's the state of that? Well, the world is more and more tuning in to the urgency of addressing the needs of the sustainability initiatives, right? It's not something, despite what I've heard 100 times this year, saying, well, certain administrations in certain countries are, abandoning sustainability and sustainability initiatives. Well, actually, all that means is they may be putting a lid on one thing, but the pressure is building up somewhere else, and there's growth happening. And indeed, that's the case with the voluntary carbon marketplace. The voluntary carbon marketplace is growing very, very fast, just because the compliance markets have kind of been handbraked a little bit this year. And so, different products will evolve, and it'll touch different parts of the demand curve. So it is an extremely exciting marketplace to work within. And, the product category of, ESG and sustainability is an all-pervasive, all kind of far-reaching thing. It affects all activities that we do as an individual, as enterprises, as companies, as, communities, and as nation states.
So let's talk right now. You touched the World Bank. Of course, it's the biggest financial organization in the world, and kudos and congratulations to have signed partnership with them. So can you explain, because it's a quite innovative project, but as well quite cutting edge, and I know that it's having a first deployment, but it can actually make a big difference for, well, all our cities and a lot of our infrastructure.
Well, the idea is to go to scale, right? If we're not going to have scale solutions, then, doing something really well in a localized environment doesn't solve the problem, across a broader footprint or around the world, you can say. Well, the World Bank, because of its, stature and its large footprint, is able to achieve just that. It can work on a government-to-government basis and design a scheme that's adopted by the government to be implemented across large urban communities. Of course, the big cities are, the low-hanging fruit over there. Asia is also a really interesting place. This project was originated out of World Bank's Indochina team, and within that, that geography, you've got big cities like, Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, Bangkok, Phnom Penh, etc., and across the straits over there, you've got Southeast Asia and countries like Indonesia and Philippines, Malaysia, etc. So there's the target-rich environment for us to introduce a scheme like this. The scheme itself, because it's formally adopted by the government and implemented, by the municipal authorities on a, large urban footprint, the scheme itself, is designed to be fairly simple so that it can have maximum adoption. Things like electric vehicles and smart lighting, solar power, and most importantly, cooling, power reductions or cooling efficiencies, like reducing the power consumption by cooling facilities, HVAC facilities. That's like, you get a big bang for your buck over there. And in aggregate, if these methodologies or these interventions can all be used together across industrial assets, commercial assets, buildings, and facilities, then one can reduce power consumption by 20, 30% potentially, right? Now, on an urban landscape, that's a pretty big bite, right? If you can reduce your power consumption in the gigawatts by 20% or 30%, now you're making some real headway, and you're giving a great deal of relief into the amount of fossil fuels and other energy sources that are required to generate that amount of power. That's the objective of the program. After it's in the early stage of deployment in Bangkok, and we can talk a bit more about it once we really get maybe on the next edition that we participate on your program, we can talk about how we performed on it and what type of scale we've achieved. But it's designed to go to scale, and once it does go to scale, it's also designed to travel into other destinations, so that the more it's being implemented, the more we're creating efficiencies across power consumption in big urban areas that result in a very large pool of new carbon credits that come from that, right? The power emission savings off the baseline results in carbon emission savings that can be converted into carbon credits. And so therefore there's a commercial product at the end of this life cycle of this activity.
So I know that we pass the time. So two last questions. So the first one, if you give a bit of context about Zoetic, you touched about it, but so mostly Zoetic is quite an ambitious company that's creating clean energy technology for power reduction. So that's quite a big thing. So if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so Zoetic is a clean tech distribution company. They license or acquire IP for clean technology solutions, and they distribute across big customer bases. That includes green refrigerants for reduction of power consumption in cooling units and HVAC units. It also has more industrial solutions around generation of clean energy and important associated activities like water treatment, and remediation of water through those clean energy solutions. So they do a whole bunch of things, right? But what companies that do a bunch of these things well, they tend not to, pay any attention to the carbon credit aspect or the carbon emissions aspect of those activities, especially for green tech companies that are saving carbon emissions. There is this potential additional revenue stream that they have not optimally targeted, which is the generation of carbon credits that come from those clean technology activities, right? So that's where we come into the picture. We come into the picture and say, hey, Zoetic, you guys are doing a great job selling this suite of clean technology solutions, but there is this additional product here which you don't know much about, but we know a lot about. So we can help you, especially with the digital toolkit that we've built, which has been purpose built around power-based emission reporting. We can manage that entire process for you. So don't worry about the carbon market part. We'll do that. You go ahead and do your other activity, and we become essentially your asset manager. And this is, again, because of my financial background, this was kind of the way that I thought, would be a sensible way to approach it. People, let them do what they're good at. Let us do what we're good at, but let us then convert that into a financial service on behalf of the customer. So the asset management model that we've introduced basically does the entire end-to-end management of of collecting the data around the solutions that they're introducing in the marketplace, converting that into reporting that can be submitted for carbon credits, generating those carbon credits, and monetizing it. And that end-to-end process, asset management process, is not only a lucrative activity for everybody involved, it brings more money to the customer, it allows us to participate, just like an asset manager would do in the performance that we generate, but it also allows us to control and have our own house credits. Right now, where Verdana is not just a service provider, we also have our inventory of credits that we can utilize for tokenization, we can utilize for distribution, we can sell, we can otherwise manage in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's quite impressive, and I'm sure there will be questions from the audience and the people using, but it's a key element for society. So, last question, and I know that I'm legal disclaimer, I'm involved as well, but it's probably the first announcement international. So, you guys have been doing fantastic work, and you created INDUK Verdana Carbon. That is a joint venture company with one of the biggest agriculture cooperatives in the world, that is INDUK Indonesia. So first of all, tell us how this new company and venture was created, and as well how it is to bring to one of the biggest cooperatives. And for the numbers that are mind-blowing, we're talking about 13.4 million farmers and an audience of 60 to 100 million people. So how can sustainability bring farmers and as well to agriculture, which is close to 2.6 billion people worldwide, and how you see the innovation of Verdana and our investment coming and joint ventures together?
So, our mantra is, technology, digitization, is efficiencies, right? We're looking at not, we're looking at the most sensible, practical, low-hanging kind of like solutions that we can pluck from and we can, everyone can benefit from, right? So INDUK is an extremely target-rich environment for that, extremely fertile ground for us to all how we've approached different problems and we brought different solutions. We built those tools. Having built those tools now, we say, okay, where else can these tools be used? It's kind of like, if you build a mousetrap, what do you want to do? You want to find some place that has a lot of mice, right? You want to find the New York subway system and put your mousetrap there because that's where, it can be used. And so that's how, not that INDUK is the New York subway system or that we're trying to catch mice, but the analogy is that it is basically a very large, pool of diversified assets that we can say, can we bring this product? And sometimes it's our product or our solution, I should say, that we can, fit into, let's say, the generation of solar power for behind the meter solutions or even grid solutions for farmers, for processing facilities, for refrigeration facilities that INDUK may have. So sometimes, we can say, oh, we have the product for that and we can do that. And so this year, for example, we signed a 300 megawatt, solar development pipeline with INDUK, which is quite, I think, attractive for everyone involved. And certainly, very, very desperately needed by the farmers and other communities that INDUK serves. So, sometimes it's our product that we can bring in, and sometimes it's third-party product saying, well, we do have this pipeline and we want to manage the carbon credits from this, solar development pipeline, but we're not a solar developer, so let's invite others to participate and work with us on that. Of course, there are nature-based solutions and agri-based solutions that, can be achieved with the diverse pool of assets that they have. A rehabilitation of like rubber plantations, sustainable agricultural initiatives in paddy farming, and the list goes on and on. And we're not going to be the experts on each one of these methodologies, each one of these processes, so we can invite and curate different service providers to come in and work with us on that. And by doing so, they bring their own investment, they bring their own expertise, and they bring their own solutions, and we can share some of that through the mechanism so that the farmers generate, even a small incremental income for a poor farmer in Indonesia is a significant bump in his earnings, a significant increase in his quality of life. That's the objective for that. But ultimately, what's exciting about our partnership with Studium, and the program that we're developing together is bringing technology solutions that allow us to communicate more efficiently with this user base, right? If we know them and they know us, then the ideas that we have that they can implement, whether it's it's ideas to increase sustainability in their activity, whether it's products or services that can bring them resources or bring them tools that make their job more productive, then we can communicate with them through a digital platform like the ones that we will introduce with you, and the type of technology progress that we've had, especially with AI and other tools, AI related tools, that accelerates the amount of communication that we can have. It accelerates the amount of touch points we can have with a large user base like this. If this were an analog process, we'd have to really scratch our heads and think, well, how do we build an infrastructural organization that can do this in an efficient, way? But using tools like AI are able to solve some of these big problems, and suddenly, we release a lot of potential opportunities on the back of that. And when you add these 2 or 3 activities we're doing, which is, again, the pragmatic things like let's, develop, renewable power solutions that can be delivered into clusters of, it can be farmers or fishermen. It even can be, processing facilities, or it can even be the grid, right? Let's develop that, because that's something that isn't, it's not rocket science. It is science, but it's not rocket science. And we can put those projects together, and we can start using, the resources that an extremely impressive and large organization like INDUK has. So let's do that. Then we can say, okay, now for the members of this cooperative who are doing all this diverse activity across agriculture and so forth, let us bring in, expert service providers to help design and implement solutions for them, and essentially be a channel for us to deliver these new, solutions to this base of members, this community, basically. And then the third thing is, how do we do that, really efficiently, and how do we do that so there's two-way communication and feedback in that loop? We do it with technology, and that's where Studium comes in.
Oh, fantastic! So a lot of things here for people listening to us. There's verdana.io, and we're going to put all this information for people to look. I think it's really a lot of knowledge as well that you guys have, and definitely is one of the things I want to do is more about these specific areas, because, for instance, the project with the World Bank, it's something that can be taken to cities around the world. The project with agriculture can be taken to, well, most of the farmers in the world, 2.8 or 2.6 billion people that are affected and live dependent of agriculture. But a lot of people are struggling still to find these things. So thank you so much, Asad. There's a lot of kudos to all the energy to push this forward. It's not easy to push something so complex and that seemed so important, but as well so not consensual. So I think you're touching with a lot of different layers that are quite challenging, and they keep changing, but at the same time you keep adapting. And as well, what you guys achieved with Verdana is quite impressive. So thank you so much. And I hope for people listening to us, please deep dive, research about Asad, about Verdana, and try to learn and engage. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode. Please share your thoughts, questions, or a topic you want next in the comments section. My team and I read them all and will tailor our future videos around your feedback. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next drop. Until next time, stay healthy and informed.